A poor single mom saved a drowning child at the beach, unaware it's the president's daughter, but when the little girl clings to her crying, "Don't leave me," shocking secrets surface that could shatter the first family forever. Will this ordinary mother survive the storm she just stepped into? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Claire's shoulders ached as she walked through her small apartment's front door after another exhausting shift at Jerry's Diner. The familiar scent of burnt coffee and greasy burgers still clung to her uniform. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers, reminding her she'd been on them for 10 straight hours. "Mama!" Ethan's cheerful voice rang out as he bounded from the living room couch where Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, had been watching him. His dark curls bounced with each step, and his bright smile made the exhaustion weighing on Claire's heart feel a little lighter. "There's my sunshine," Claire said, wrapping him in a tight hug. She breathed in the scent of his apple shampoo, the cheap kind from the dollar store that somehow smelled better than any expensive brand to her. Mrs. Rodriguez gathered her knitting and smiled warmly. "He was an angel, as always. Did all his homework, too." "Thank you so much," Claire said, walking her to the door. She dug in her pocket for the babysitting money, but Mrs. Rodriguez waved it away. "Save it for something special," the older woman insisted, patting Claire's hand. "You work too hard, Mahita." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Claire looked around their tiny apartment. The worn furniture had seen better days, and the carpet was threadbare in spots, but she kept it spotlessly clean. A stack of bills on the kitchen counter caught her eye, making her stomach clench. The rent was due in 3 days, and she was still short. "Mama, can we please go to the beach tomorrow?" Ethan asked, tugging at her uniform sleeve. "You promised we'd go when you had a Saturday off." Claire's first instinct was to say no. That money she'd saved from Mrs. Rodriguez could go toward the rent, but looking into Ethan's hopeful brown eyes, she couldn't bring herself to disappoint him again. "You know what? That's exactly what we're going to do," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "We'll pack a picnic and make a whole day of it." Ethan jumped up and down, his excitement infectious. "Can we get hot dogs from the stand? And ice cream?" Claire's heart squeezed. "How about we make our own sandwiches? Much tastier than hot dogs. And we can freeze some juice boxes for special treats." To her relief, Ethan nodded eagerly. "Can I help make the sandwiches?" "Of course, baby. But first, Mama needs a shower and some sleep." Later that night, after tucking Ethan into bed, Claire sat at their small kitchen table with a notepad, calculating and recalculating numbers that refused to add up. Between the rent, utilities, and groceries, there was never enough. Her second job cleaning offices had cut back her hours, and the tips at the diner had been lousy lately. She buried her face in her hands, allowing herself one moment of weakness when Ethan couldn't see. Then she straightened up, wiped her eyes, and started packing their beach bag. She found their old blanket, slightly faded but clean, and their one beach towel. They'd have to share, but they always made it work. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Claire woke early to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, carefully wrapping them in wax paper she'd saved from previous uses. She packed carrots and apple slices, and the juice boxes she'd frozen overnight. "Ready for our adventure?" she asked as Ethan emerged from his room, already wearing his swim trunks despite the early hour. "Ready." He helped her carry their supplies to the bus stop, chattering excitedly about building sandcastles and finding seashells. The bus ride to the beach took 45 minutes. Claire tried not to think about the round-trip fare eating into their tight budget. Instead, she focused on Ethan's face pressed against the window, pointing out every dog and interesting building they passed. When they finally arrived at the beach, the morning sun was warming the sand. Claire found a spot far enough from the water to be safe but close enough to hear the waves. She spread their blanket carefully, weighing down the corners with their shoes. "Remember the rules," she called as Ethan ran toward the water's edge. "Not past your knees without me." "I know, Mama," he shouted back, already busy collecting shells. Claire watched him, her heart full. These were the moments that made everything worth it. Every double shift, every skipped meal so he could have enough, every night spent worrying about bills. Seeing him happy and carefree, just being a child, made her feel like maybe she wasn't failing completely as a mother. The beach was starting to fill up with families who clearly had more means than they did. Children ran past with expensive toys and floats. Parents set up elaborate umbrellas and coolers full of snacks. Claire felt a familiar pang of inadequacy but pushed it aside. "Mama, look what I found!" Ethan ran up, holding a perfectly formed shell. "It looks like a fairy's house." "It's beautiful, baby," she said, genuinely amazed by the shell's pearly interior. "Should we start a collection?" They spent the morning building a sandcastle, using their hands since they didn't have any tools. Claire showed Ethan how to drip wet sand to make towers, and he delighted in decorating their creation with shells and bits of seaweed. His creativity amazed her. He turned their simple castle into an entire story about merpeople and underwater kings. Around noon, they sat on their blanket to eat lunch. Claire watched as Ethan devoured his sandwich, remembering times when she'd gone hungry to make sure he had enough to eat. Today, though, she had managed to pack them each a whole sandwich and enough snacks to feel like a real picnic. "This is the best day ever," Ethan declared, juice box in hand. "Can we come back next weekend?" "We'll see," Claire said softly, knowing it might be months before she could manage another day like this. The cost of the bus fare alone, but she pushed those thoughts away. Today wasn't for worrying about money. Today was for making memories with her son, for pretending that their life was as simple and carefree as this moment on the beach. Claire leaned back on the blanket, letting the warm sun ease some of the tension from her shoulders. The sound of the waves was soothing, almost hypnotic. Ethan was contentedly drawing pictures in the sand nearby. For just this moment, everything felt perfect. Maybe, she thought, closing her eyes briefly, she could allow herself to truly relax. Just for today, she could forget about the overdue rent notice hidden in her purse or the electricity bill she'd have to somehow stretch her next paycheck to cover. The gentle breeze carried the scent of salt water and sunscreen. Nearby, seagulls called to each other, and children's laughter mixed with the rhythm of the waves. Claire felt her breathing slow, matching the peaceful tempo of the ocean. Then a child's piercing scream shattered the tranquil morning. The peaceful morning shattered with a child's desperate scream. Claire jolted upright, sand falling from her shoulders as her eyes darted across the sparkling water. At first, she saw nothing but gentle waves rolling toward shore. Then she spotted it, small arms flailing amid the whitecaps, a little head bobbing up and down before disappearing under the surface. "Stay right here, Ethan," Claire commanded, already on her feet. "Don't move from this spot." She sprinted across the hot sand, her heart thundering against her ribs. The few beachgoers nearby stood frozen, pointing and shouting but doing nothing. Claire didn't hesitate. She plunged into the cold water, decades-old swimming lessons flooding back to her mind. "Hold on!" she screamed, pushing through the breaking waves. Her father's steady voice echoed in her memory. "Keep your head above water. Don't fight the current. Work with it. The ocean's stronger than you'll ever be." The girl surfaced again, maybe 30 feet out, her terrified face visible for just a moment before another wave crashed over her. Claire dove under the next wave, kicking hard. The salt water stung her eyes, but she kept them open, searching for any sign of the child in the murky blue. There, a flash of pink swimsuit, small legs kicking weakly. Claire burst through the surface, gasping for air. The current tugged at her legs, trying to pull her further from shore. She fought against it, remembering her father's lessons from those long-ago summers. Don't panic. Panic kills faster than anything in the water. "I'm coming!" she called out, though she doubted the girl could hear her over the roar of the waves. Claire's muscles burned as she pushed forward, closing the distance stroke by stroke. Finally, her fingers brushed against the girl's arm. She grabbed hold, pulling the small body against her chest. The child thrashed in panic, nearly pushing them both under. "It's okay, sweetie," Claire soothed, trying to keep them both afloat. "I've got you. Hold on to my shoulders." Small arms wrapped around her neck in a desperate grip. Claire turned toward shore, but the current fought her every movement. She kicked steadily, one arm wrapped protectively around the girl's waist. The shore seemed impossibly far away. "Just keep kicking," she murmured, as much to herself as to the frightened child clinging to her. "We're going to make it." Her legs felt like lead, but Claire refused to give up. She thought of Ethan watching from the beach, of this little girl's family probably sick with worry. Inch by inch, she worked her way through the waves, letting them help push her toward shore when she could. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Claire's feet finally touched sand. She staggered forward, still holding the girl tightly. As the water grew shallow enough to stand, she lifted the child in her arms, walking the last few steps to the beach on trembling legs. People rushed forward to help, but Claire focused on laying the girl gently on the sand. The child coughed violently, water spilling from her mouth. Claire turned her onto her side, rubbing her back as she had done for Ethan during childhood illnesses. "That's it, sweetheart. You're safe now. Just breathe." The girl's coughing subsided, replaced by hiccuping sobs. She launched herself at Claire, throwing thin arms around her neck. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, her whole body shaking. "Please don't leave me." Claire held her close, murmuring soft reassurances. "I'm right here. You're okay now." The screech of tires on pavement cut through the moment. Claire looked up to see 3 black SUVs skidding to a stop on the boardwalk, kicking up clouds of dust. Men in dark suits poured out of the vehicles, moving with urgent purpose toward the beach. The air filled with shouts and pounding footsteps as men in dark suits swarmed the beach. Their polished shoes kicked up sand as they converged on Claire and the trembling girl in her arms. The peaceful morning transformed into chaos in mere seconds. "Step away from her," one agent commanded, his hand reaching for the child. The little girl's fingers dug into Claire's wet shirt. "No, no!" she screamed, burying her face against Claire's shoulder. "Miss, release her now," another agent ordered, his tone brooking no argument. His sunglasses reflected Claire's startled expression as he reached for the child. Claire's maternal instincts warred with the authority in their voices. The girl was clearly terrified, but these men seemed official, professional. Before she could decide what to do, strong hands gripped the child's waist, pulling her away. "Lily, you're safe now," one of the suits assured, though his stern expression didn't match his gentle words. The name struck Claire like a physical blow. Lily. Why did that sound familiar? "Mommy?" Ethan's small voice called out. He stood a few feet away, confusion and fear etched on his young face. Claire scrambled to her feet, sand clinging to her wet clothes, and rushed to pull him close. The crowd that had gathered to watch the rescue now pressed closer, phones raised to capture the scene. Whispers rippled through the onlookers like waves. "Did she say Lily? Those are Secret Service agents. Oh my God, isn't that the president's kid?" Claire's heart stopped. She looked again at the girl. Really looked at her this time. The expensive swimsuit, the carefully braided hair, the familiar face she'd seen in countless news photos. How had she not recognized Lily Grant, the president's daughter? Lily thrashed in the agent's grip, reaching back toward Claire with desperate hands. "Please, I want to stay with her, please." "Miss, we need you to remain here." One of the agents, his badge identified him as Agent Miller, addressed Claire directly. "We'll have some questions for you." Claire nodded numbly, holding Ethan tighter as more agents created a perimeter around them. The crowd pressed against this boundary, phones still recording every moment. Claire could already imagine the videos spreading across social media, her soaking wet form and shabby beach clothes broadcast for all to see. "Mommy, why are they taking her?" Ethan whispered, his small hand gripping hers. "They're keeping her safe, sweetie," Claire managed, though the words felt hollow as Lily's cries continued. Agent Miller spoke rapidly into his wrist mic. "Package secure, proceeding to transport. Area needs containment." More black SUVs arrived, their tires spraying sand. The back door of one vehicle opened, and Lily was quickly ushered inside, despite her continued protests. The windows were tinted dark, but Claire could still see the little girl's outline. Lily pressed her small hand against the glass, and even from this distance, Claire could read her lips. "Don't leave me." The desperate plea made Claire's chest ache. She'd saved the child's life, but somehow it felt like she was failing her all over again by letting her be taken away so frightened and alone. "Ma'am," Agent Miller's voice pulled her attention back. "We'll need your full name and contact information. The situation requires a complete debrief." Claire swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of her circumstances. a struggling single mother who'd just gotten tangled up in a matter of national security. "Of course," she said quietly, her voice rough from the salt water. "Whatever you need." The crowd continued to grow, held back by more agents who'd arrived on scene. Claire heard snippets of their excited chatter. "That woman just saved the president's daughter. Did you see her swim out there? The current was so strong. Someone said she's just a waitress." Ethan pressed closer to her side, overwhelmed by the chaos. Claire stroked his hair, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. Her eyes kept returning to the SUV, where Lily Saturday. The little girl's hand remained pressed against the window, a silent plea that seemed to reach across the growing distance between them. One of the female agents approached with a blanket, draping it around Claire's shoulders. The small kindness nearly undid her composure. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thank you," the agent replied softly. "That current's taken strong swimmers before. What you did was incredible." But Claire barely heard the praise. All she could think about was the terror in Lily's eyes. Not from nearly drowning, but from being separated from the stranger who'd saved her. Something about that fear felt wrong, felt deeper than the moment warranted. Agent Miller returned with a tablet. "We'll need your statement now, Miss Dawson. Claire Dawson." She pulled the blanket tighter, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her cold despite the warm morning Sunday. Through the crowd's excited murmuring and the agent's efficient movements, Claire kept her eyes on that small hand pressed against the dark window. Even as the SUV's engine started up, Lily didn't move, didn't take her palm from the glass. The vehicle pulled away, taking with it a child who'd grabbed hold of Claire's heart in the space of mere minutes. The other SUVs followed in a precise formation, leaving behind a beach full of buzzing onlookers and a soaking wet waitress who couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just become part of something much bigger than a morning rescue. The small apartment felt even tinier than usual as Claire moved through their evening routine. The sound of police sirens wailed in the distance, normal for their neighborhood. But tonight, every noise made her jump. Her hands still trembled slightly as she pulled Ethan's worn Batman pajamas from the dryer. "Mom, are you okay?" Ethan asked from his perch on their second-hand couch. His big brown eyes watched her with that too grown-up look she sometimes caught on his face. "You've been really quiet since we got home." Claire forced a smile. "Just tired from all that swimming, honey." She ruffled his dark hair, still damp from his bath. Time for bed. Their apartment might be shabby, with water stains on the ceiling and a draft that whistled through the windows, but Claire had done her best to make Ethan's room a happy place. Star Wars posters covered the cracks in the walls, and strings of dollar store twinkle lights gave the space a magical feel. Ethan crawled into bed, clutching the stuffed dragon he'd had since he was 3. "Mom, that little girl today, do you think she's okay?" Claire sat on the edge of his narrow bed, the springs creaking under her weight. The memory of the rescue flooded back. The taste of salt water, the burning in her muscles as she fought the current, the terror in that little girl's eyes. "I'm sure she's fine, sweetie. She's probably safe at home with her family right now." Claire tucked the thin blanket around him, trying to push away the image of those small hands pressing against the SUV's window. "The people at the beach said she was the president's daughter. Is that true?" Claire hesitated. "I think so. But that doesn't matter. She was just a little girl who needed help." Ethan yawned. "You were really brave, Mom. Like a superhero." "Thank you, baby." Claire kissed his forehead, breathing in the clean scent of his shampoo. "Sweet dreams." She left his door cracked open, just the way he liked it, and moved to the kitchen. Dishes from breakfast still sat in the sink. There hadn't been time to wash them before work this morning. The clock on the microwave blinked 9:47 p.m. Claire slumped into a kitchen chair, exhaustion settling into her bones. The events of the day felt surreal. Had she really saved the president's daughter? The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. The sudden ring of her cell phone made her jump. She fumbled to grab it from her purse, frowning at the unknown number on the screen. Usually, unknown numbers meant bill collectors, but it was too late for those calls. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Good evening. Is this Claire Dawson?" The woman's voice was warm, but carried an unmistakable air of authority. "Yes, this is she. Miss Dawson, this is Margaret Grant." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the edge of the kitchen table. "I wanted to personally thank you for what you did today. You saved my daughter's life." The First Lady's voice cracked slightly on the word daughter, and in that moment, she sounded less like a public figure and more like a worried mother. I just did what anyone would do," Claire stammered. "No, Miss Dawson. What you did was extraordinary. Lily hasn't stopped talking about you since she came home." There was a pause. "Which is actually why I'm calling. We would very much like to meet with you properly. Would you be able to come to the White House tomorrow morning?" Claire's mind went blank. The White House? Her gaze drifted to the pile of bills on the counter, to the stain on her work uniform hanging by the door, to the crack in the linoleum floor she kept meaning to fix. I work tomorrow," she managed. "At the diner. I can't." She trailed off, realizing she was saying no to the First Lady of the United States. "Please don't worry about your work schedule. We'll take care of that. A car will pick you up at 9 a.m. if that's acceptable." Margaret's tone was gentle but left little room for argument. Claire's thoughts raced to Ethan. "My son. I can't leave him alone." "Of course not. Please bring him with you. Lily would love to meet him as well." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too cramped. Claire's hand shook as she wrote down the details Margaret gave her. "Thank you, Miss Dawson. We'll see you tomorrow morning." The call ended, leaving Claire sitting in her quiet kitchen, staring at her phone in disbelief. The cheap fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the building, a baby was crying. "The president's wife wants to meet me?" she whispered to herself, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. The next morning arrived with a mix of autumn chill and morning dew. Claire stood on the cracked sidewalk outside their apartment building, clutching Ethan's hand while trying to smooth her best thrift store dress, a navy blue number she usually saved for job interviews. The fabric, worn thin from too many washes, caught against her rough hands. "Is that our car, Mom?" Ethan whispered, pointing at a gleaming black sedan that seemed completely out of place in their neighborhood. The vehicle's polished surface reflected the morning sun like a mirror. A tall man in a crisp suit stepped out, his earpiece and professional demeanor marking him as government security. "Miss Dawson? I'm Agent Thompson. We're here to escort you to Washington." Claire swallowed hard and nodded, guiding Ethan toward the car. The leather seats creaked beneath them. Real leather, not the peeling vinyl she was used to. Ethan's eyes grew wide as he discovered the car had a small TV screen and climate controls in the back. "Mom, look," he whispered excitedly, pointing at every new feature he discovered. The 3-hour drive passed in a blur of highways and increasingly manicured landscapes. Claire tried to keep her breathing steady as they approached Washington, D.C. The Capitol dome rose in the distance, a sight she'd only seen on TV or in Ethan's school textbooks. When they pulled up to the White House gates, Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. Security checkpoints, guards with serious expressions, and metal detectors made her feel like she was entering another world entirely. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. "Please follow me," Agent Thompson said, leading them through corridors that seemed to grow more elaborate with each step. The floors were polished marble, reflecting their images like mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their prisms creating tiny rainbows on the walls. Oil paintings of past presidents stared down at them, their eyes seeming to follow their progress. Claire felt the worn hem of her dress brush against her knees and wished she'd had something, anything, more suitable to wear. Her sensible black flats, scuffed at the toes, clicked softly against the marble. Each step reminded her how out of place they were. "Your hands are sweaty, Mom," Ethan whispered, still clinging to her fingers. "Sorry, honey," Claire whispered back, trying to wipe her palm discreetly against her dress. The air here smelled different, like furniture polish and history. They passed staff members who nodded politely but kept their distance. Everyone moved with purpose, carrying folders or speaking in hushed tones into phones. Claire noticed how they all wore perfectly pressed clothes and carried themselves with confidence she couldn't imagine possessing. Agent Thompson led them to a grand hallway lined with blue and gold curtains. "Please wait here. The First Lady will be with you shortly," He stepped back, taking up a position near the wall. Claire knelt down to Ethan's level, straightening his collar. She dressed him in his church clothes, khaki pants and a button-down shirt they'd found at Goodwill last month. "Remember what we talked about? Best behavior, okay?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Yes, Mom." His eyes darted around the hall, taking in every detail. "Everything's so shiny here." Claire stood up, smoothing her dress again. She could see their reflection in the massive gilded mirror across the hall. A small woman with worry lines around her eyes, and a little boy who looked both excited and terrified. They seemed like characters who'd wandered into the wrong story. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the corridor. Before Claire could process what was happening, a small figure in a blue dress came flying around the corner. Lily's face lit up the moment she saw them, her eyes filling with tears. "You came!" Lily cried out, launching herself toward Claire. "You really came!" Claire caught the little girl instinctively, her arms wrapping around the small body that crashed into her. Lily buried her face in Claire's neck, her tears warm against Claire's skin. "I knew you would," Lily sobbed, her words muffled. "I told them you had to come. I told them." Claire held the trembling child, her own eyes stinging with unexpected tears. She could feel Lily's heart racing, could smell the expensive shampoo in her hair. This wasn't the formal meeting she'd expected. This was raw and real and somehow more overwhelming than all the marble and chandeliers combined. Agent Thompson had stepped forward, looking uncertain, but Lily only gripped Claire tighter. "No," the little girl said firmly, though her voice shook. "She's staying. She's my safe person." Claire caught Ethan's concerned expression and reached out with one hand to squeeze his shoulder, keeping him close while still holding Lily. The three of them stood there in the grand hallway, an unlikely island in a sea of formality and protocol. "Sweetheart," Claire said softly, her motherly instincts taking over despite the intimidating surroundings. "I'm here. It's okay." She rubbed small circles on Lily's back, the same way she soothed Ethan after nightmares. Lily slowly lifted her tear-stained face, hiccuping slightly. "You saved me," she whispered. "Nobody else ever." She trailed off, her fingers clutching Claire's dress, as if afraid she might disappear. Agent Thompson cleared his throat. "Miss Grant, your mother is waiting in the blue room." But Lily shook her head, pressing closer to Claire. "She comes with me," she insisted. "Please? She has to come with me." Claire stood there, holding the president's daughter in her arms, feeling the weight of worlds colliding. The marble floors gleamed, the portraits watched, and somewhere in this maze of power and protocol, a meeting with the First Lady awaited. But for now, all that mattered was the child clinging to her like a lifeline, and the quiet certainty that nothing in her life would ever be the same. Claire sat stiffly on the edge of an antique sofa that probably cost more than her yearly salary. The gleaming tea service before her reflected her awkward posture, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong among the refined furnishings of the White House's private family room. First Lady Margaret Grant poured tea with practiced grace, her pearl bracelet catching the afternoon light. "Milk or lemon, Mrs. Dawson?" "Just Claire, please, and milk would be nice." Claire's voice came out smaller than she intended. Next to her, Ethan swung his legs, carefully holding a cookie over a china plate that looked impossibly delicate. President Grant stood by the fireplace, his commanding presence filling the room. "What you did yesterday was extraordinary, Claire. Not many would risk their lives for a stranger." "Anyone would have done the same," Claire said, but the president shook his head. "No, they wouldn't. We watched the security footage. Those waves were dangerous. You didn't hesitate." Lily, who hadn't left Claire's side since their reunion in the hallway, pressed closer on the sofa. The little girl's shoulder touched Claire's arm, seeking contact like a magnet finding true north. "The Secret Service team responsible for the beach outing has been reassigned," the president continued, his voice rising with controlled anger. "The incompetence is unacceptable. If Lily had just stayed where she was told—" At his sharp tone, Lily flinched. It was subtle, but Claire felt it clearly where their arms touched. The girl's fingers tightened on her untouched cookie, crumbs falling onto her lap. Margaret smoothly interrupted. "Daniel, perhaps we could discuss security protocols later." Her smile remained perfect, but her eyes carried a warning. "This is about thanking Claire." The president cleared his throat, visibly reining in his frustration. "Of course. My apologies." Claire watched the family dynamic play out with growing unease. The president's love for his daughter was obvious, but something felt off. There was a distance there, like a glass wall neither knew how to break through. "Lily," Margaret said gently, "why don't you show Ethan your playroom while we talk?" "No!" Lily's outburst startled everyone. Her face flushed red, but she lifted her chin. "I want to stay with Claire." The president frowned. "Lily, that's not how we speak to—" "It's okay," Claire interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. She smiled at Lily. "I'd like it if you stayed." Relief flooded the child's face. Ethan, picking up on the tension, scooted closer to his mother. Claire wrapped an arm around both children, the gesture as natural as breathing. Margaret set her teacup down with a soft clink. "Claire, there's something I'd like to discuss." She glanced at her husband, who gave a slight nod. "We've noticed how comfortable Lily is with you. It's rare for her to connect with anyone so quickly." Claire thought of Lily's desperate plea at the beach, "Don't leave me." It hadn't just been fear of drowning in that voice. "Would you consider staying with us for a few days?" Margaret's request came carefully wrapped in casual tones. "Just until Lily feels more settled after yesterday's trauma. We have lovely guest quarters, and of course Ethan would stay too." Claire's mouth went dry. I have work. 2 jobs, actually. I can't just—" "We'll compensate you for any lost wages," the president said quickly, "and make arrangements with your employers." Lily's hand found Claire's, squeezing tight. The hope in the girl's eyes made Claire's heart ache. "Maybe." Claire looked at Ethan, who was trying hard to hide his excitement at the prospect of staying in what probably seemed like a castle to him. "Maybe just for a few days." "Wonderful." Margaret's smile held genuine warmth now. "I'll have Mrs. Patterson show you to your rooms." She rang a small silver bell. A motherly woman in a neat uniform appeared so quickly, Claire wondered if she'd been waiting just outside. "This way, please." As they stood to follow Mrs. Patterson, Lily kept hold of Claire's hand. The president stepped forward awkwardly, as if to hug his daughter goodnight, but Lily ducked behind Claire slightly. The president's face flickered with hurt before smoothing into a diplomatic mask. "Sleep well, everyone," he said formally, retreating behind his desk. The guest quarters turned out to be larger than Claire's entire apartment. 2 connecting rooms featured hand-carved furniture, silk drapes, and beds that looked like clouds dressed in Egyptian cotton. A basket of children's books and toys had already appeared for Ethan, who explored the space with wide-eyed wonder. It took nearly an hour to convince Lily to return to her own room. Only after Claire promised 3 times that she wouldn't leave during the night did the girl finally allow Margaret to lead her away. Now, in the quiet of the late evening, Claire stood at the window overlooking the carefully manicured White House grounds. Ethan slept peacefully in the adjoining room, surrounded by more luxury than she'd ever been able to give him. The enormity of her situation pressed in. Yesterday, she'd been a waitress worried about making rent. Today, she was a guest of the president, pulled into what seemed like a web of family dynamics she didn't fully understand. Kneeling beside her bed, Claire closed her eyes. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know what you're doing here, but I could really use some guidance." She thought of Lily's flinch, of the loneliness beneath the girl's desperation for connection. "Help me, help her, if that's what you're calling me to do." She climbed into the impossibly soft bed, knowing her life had just veered onto a path she never could have imagined. The last thing she saw before drifting off was moonlight painting silver patterns on the historic walls, a world away from her humble apartment but somehow exactly where she needed to be. Claire blinked awake to unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through tall windows with heavy cream curtains, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beams. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The mattress felt too soft, the sheets too silky against her skin. Then her eyes focused on a small figure sitting cross-legged on the plush carpet. "Good morning," Lily whispered, still in her pink pajamas decorated with tiny crowns. Her long brown hair was slightly tangled from sleep. Claire sat up, glancing at Ethan, who was still soundly asleep in the adjacent bed. "Lily? How long have you been sitting there, sweetheart?" "A little while." The girl fidgeted with the hem of her pajama top. "I didn't want to wake you up, but—" She hesitated, then rushed out in a single breath. "Would you please have breakfast with me? Not in the big dining room with all the grown-ups talking about boring stuff?" Claire's heart squeezed at the hopeful look in Lily's eyes. "Won't your parents be expecting you?" "Daddy has meetings." "He always has meetings." Lily's shoulders slumped. "And Mommy's doing her morning calls. Please? We can eat in the family kitchen. Miss Rosa makes the best chocolate chip pancakes. Let me get dressed first, and we'll need to wait for Ethan to wake up." "I'm awake," Ethan mumbled, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "Did somebody say pancakes?" Within 30 minutes, Claire found herself in a cozy kitchen that felt worlds away from the formal spaces she'd seen yesterday. Warm yellow walls and copper pots hanging from a rack gave it a homey feel. Miss Rosa, a plump woman with kind eyes, hummed as she flipped perfectly golden pancakes on a griddle. "Mira estos niños," Miss Rosa smiled, setting plates stacked with pancakes in front of the children. "So skinny. Eat, eat." Lily giggled, a sound Claire hadn't heard from her before. "Miss Rosa thinks everyone is too skinny." As they ate, Ethan and Lily discovered they both loved the same cartoon show. Their animated conversation about favorite episodes brought a smile to Claire's face. It was the most natural she'd seen Lily act since meeting her. "Want to see my playroom?" Lily asked Ethan after breakfast. "I have lots of puzzles." The playroom turned out to be larger than Claire's entire apartment. Shelves lined with toys and games reached the ceiling, but something about the pristine condition of everything made Claire sad. These weren't well-loved toys. They looked barely touched. Lily pulled out a 1,000-piece puzzle showing a fairy tale castle. "This is my favorite, but I've never finished it. Nobody ever has time." End of chapter 6. "We have time," Claire said softly. She helped them clear space on a low table, and soon both children were sorting edge pieces with intense concentration. Throughout the morning, Claire watched their friendship bloom. Ethan showed Lily his technique for finding matching pieces, while Lily shared stories about the real castles she'd visited. They worked steadily, breaking only for juice and cookies that Miss Rosa insisted on bringing. "Look!" Lily exclaimed around noon, fitting in the final tower piece. "We did it!" She threw her arms around Ethan in an impulsive hug. The day passed in a blur of puzzles, cartoon episodes, and games. Claire noticed how the staff peeked in occasionally, smiling at the sound of children's laughter echoing through usually quiet halls. Even Margaret stopped by briefly, looking relieved to see her daughter playing so happily. As evening approached, Lily grew quieter, checking the clock with increasing anxiety. When a staff member announced it was bedtime, she clung to Claire's hand. "Will you tuck me in? Please?" Claire looked questioningly at Margaret, who nodded with what looked like gratitude. Lily's bedroom was a little girl's dream, all soft pinks and whites, with a canopy bed fit for a princess. But the stuffed animals looked too perfectly arranged, the books too neatly aligned. Claire helped Lily into bed while Ethan waited in the doorway. "Story?" Lily asked hopefully, holding out a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, the only book that showed signs of real use. Claire settled into a chair beside the bed and began to read. Ethan drifted over to listen too, perching on the bed's edge. By the time the toy rabbit became real through love, Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep. As Claire tucked the blanket around her shoulders, Lily suddenly grabbed her hand. In the soft lamplight, her face looked younger, more vulnerable. "Please, don't ever leave me," she whispered. Claire's heart cracked at the raw need in those words. She smoothed Lily's hair back, trying to find the right response to such a loaded request. But before she could speak, Lily's eyes had drifted closed, her small fingers still wrapped tightly around Claire's hand. Claire walked through the grand hallway of the White House, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The early morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, making the polished surfaces gleam. She'd woken up early, a habit from years of dawn shifts at the diner, and decided to explore while the children still slept. As she rounded a corner, voices drifted from what appeared to be a staff break room. She slowed her pace, not meaning to eavesdrop, but her own name caught her attention. "Did you see what they found about Claire Dawson?" a hushed voice said. "3 eviction notices in the past year. I heard she works 2 jobs," another voice added. "Can barely make ends meet. The Daily News is running a whole piece on her. They're calling her America's poor hero mom." Claire's chest tightened. She pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling slightly. The voices continued, oblivious to her presence. "Someone leaked her rental application. She's behind on utilities too. Makes you wonder how she manages to raise a kid like that." Claire hurried past the door, her face burning. She found her way to a quiet sitting room and sank into a plush chair, pulling out her phone with shaking fingers. The headlines jumped out at her immediately. "Hero Mom's Hidden Struggles. The Truth Behind Claire Dawson's Financial Crisis. White House Savior Living on the Edge. Claire Dawson's Battle with Poverty. Questions. Arise about Hero Mom's living conditions." Photos of her apartment building filled the screens, the peeling paint, the broken mailbox, the rusty fire escape. Someone had even photographed the eviction notice taped to her door last month, the one she'd managed to resolve by picking up extra night shifts. Tears blurred her vision. She'd worked so hard to keep her struggles private, to protect Ethan from knowing just how close to the edge they lived. Now everything was exposed, laid bare for the world to judge. A gentle knock on the door made her quickly wipe her eyes. A White House aide entered, carrying a tablet. "Miss Dawson? The President's communications team would like to discuss these recent articles with you. They think it might be best to release an official statement." Claire nodded numbly, but inside she felt like screaming. An official statement about what? About how she sometimes had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying Ethan new shoes? About the nights she went to bed hungry so her son could have seconds at dinner? She made her way back to their guest room, hoping to compose herself before the children woke up. But as she opened the door, she found Ethan already awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed with her phone in his hands. Her heart stopped. "Ethan, what are you looking at?" "Your picture's all over the internet, Mom," he said, his young face serious. "They're talking about our apartment and stuff." Claire sat beside him, gently taking the phone. "I'm sorry you had to see that, honey." "Why are you sorry?" Ethan looked up at her with those wise eyes that sometimes made her forget he was only 7. "You always tell me we should be proud of who we are." "This is different," Claire whispered, her voice catching. "These people, they're judging us. They think because we don't have much money we're—" She couldn't finish. "They think we're not good enough?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire pulled him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair. "Something like that." Ethan wiggled out of her embrace and stood up, his small face determined. "Mom, they just don't know how strong you are." The simple truth in his words hit her like a wave. Claire stared at her son, this remarkable child who saw her not through the lens of bank statements or social status, but through eyes of pure love. He didn't see their shabby apartment or her worn clothes. He saw the mother who read him stories even when exhausted, who taught him to be kind even when the world wasn't kind to them, who showed him that love was worth more than any amount of money. His innocent wisdom made the headlines seem suddenly smaller, less important. Let them dig through her financial history. Let them expose every overdue bill and empty bank account. They could never expose what really mattered, the strength of a mother's love, the dignity of honest work, the richness of a life measured not in dollars but in moments of grace. Claire drew Ethan close again, this time letting her tears fall freely. Not tears of shame anymore, but of gratitude for this child who reminded her of who she really was. "You're right, baby," she whispered. "They don't know how strong we are. Not at all." Claire stood in front of the full-length mirror in her guest room, barely recognizing herself. The White House staff had provided her with an elegant navy blue dress that fit perfectly, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing dress-up. Her hands smoothed invisible wrinkles, a nervous habit she couldn't control. "Mom, you look like a princess," Ethan exclaimed from where he sat on the bed, already dressed in a child-sized suit that made him look older than his 7 years. "Oh, honey, I don't know about that," Claire replied, tugging at the dress's neckline. "I'm just hoping I don't knock over any fancy glasses or use the wrong fork." A soft knock at the door made her jump. Margaret Grant, the First Lady, stepped in wearing a crimson evening gown. Her warm smile helped ease some of Claire's tension. "Claire, you look lovely," Margaret said. "Are you ready? The guests will be arriving soon." Claire's stomach churned. "Mrs. Grant, I'm not sure I belong at a state dinner. Maybe I should just stay here with Ethan." "Nonsense," Margaret interrupted gently. "Daniel specifically requested your presence. And please, call me Margaret." She turned to Ethan. "And you, young man, are going to have a wonderful time in the children's wing with Lily and our best childcare staff." The walk to the state dining room felt like a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over everything, making the walls shimmer. Secret Service agents stood discreetly at every entrance, their faces impassive. Claire could hear the murmur of voices growing louder as they approached. "Just be yourself," Margaret whispered before they entered. "That's more than enough." The room was filled with men in tuxedos and women in designer dresses. Claire recognized some faces from television: senators, ambassadors, and what looked like foreign diplomats. Her palms grew sweaty. "Claire," a high-pitched voice cut through the crowd. Lily darted between guests, ignoring the disapproving looks from some of the adults. She wore a pale pink dress that matched the ribbons in her hair. Claire knelt down to hug her, grateful for the familiar face. "Hi, sweetheart. You look beautiful." Lily grabbed her hand and started pulling her through the crowd. "Come meet my friends. This is the lady I told you about," she announced to a small group of well-dressed people. "She saved my life at the beach." Claire felt her cheeks flush as several pairs of eyes turned to her with interest. A distinguished-looking man with a British accent spoke first. "Ah, so you're the brave woman we've been hearing about. Extraordinary story." Before Claire could stammer a response, a bell chimed softly. President Grant stood at the head of the room, commanding immediate attention. He cut an impressive figure in his tuxedo, but Claire noticed the way his eyes softened when they landed on Lily. "Distinguished guests, before we begin our meal, I'd like to say a few words," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "We are honored to have with us tonight someone who reminds us what true courage looks like." Claire's heart thundered in her chest as he gestured toward her. 3 days ago, Claire Dawson didn't hesitate when she saw a child in danger. She didn't know it was my daughter. She didn't stop to consider the risks to herself. She simply acted with the pure instinct of someone whose moral compass points true north. He lifted his glass. In doing so, she not only saved Lily's life, but showed us all what it means to be an American in the finest sense, someone who sees beyond status or station to help another human being in need. The room burst into applause. Claire felt tears prickling at her eyes as Lily squeezed her hand tightly. The dinner that followed was surprisingly pleasant. Claire found herself seated between a kind-faced senator's wife who helped her navigate the multiple courses and a French diplomat who shared funny stories about his own children. The food was exquisite, things Claire had only seen in magazines, but what touched her most was how people listened when she spoke, genuinely interested in her perspective. "Tell me," the senator's wife asked, "what made you jump into those waves without thinking twice?" Claire considered the question carefully. "I'm a mother," she said simply. "When you hear a child screaming for help, nothing else matters. Not the danger, not your own fears. You just move." The woman nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's real nobility," she said quietly. As the evening drew to a close, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. The crushing weight of unpaid bills and constant worry seemed far away. She walked back to her guest room with Lily's goodnight hug still warming her heart and the president's words echoing in her mind. In her room, she found Ethan already asleep, curled up on the plush bed. She carefully sat on the edge, not wanting to wake him, and looked out the window at the Washington Monument glowing in the distance. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Claire allowed herself to feel something dangerous: hope. Not just for tomorrow or next week, but for a future where she and Ethan might not have to struggle quite so hard. Where they might be valued for who they were, not judged for what they lacked. She touched the soft fabric of her borrowed dress, remembering the respect in people's eyes when they looked at her tonight. For once, they had seen her really seen her, as more than just a poor single mother barely scraping by. Claire closed her eyes and let herself bask in that feeling, knowing it might not last but treasuring it all the same. Claire's heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she walked through the White House's long corridor, still wearing the elegant navy dress from the state dinner. The warmth of the evening celebration lingered, but something felt off. The usual bustle of staff had changed to hushed whispers and worried glances. As she rounded the corner toward the security office, she heard Agent Miller's stern voice through the partially open door. "We need to increase patrols. These threats are escalating." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She slowed her pace, staying just out of sight. "The letters arrived again this morning," another agent said, this time with photos of the first daughter at her school. "The president needs to be briefed immediately," Miller responded. "And someone needs to screen Miss Grant's mail more thoroughly. We can't let any more of these slip through." Claire's fingers curled into fists, her maternal instincts surging. The thought of someone targeting Lily made her stomach turn. She'd seen how fragile the little girl was, how desperately she needed to feel safe. Without thinking, Claire pushed the door open. Agent Miller and 3 other agents turned sharply, their conversations dying instantly. "Mrs. Dawson," Miller said stiffly, "this is a restricted area." "Is Lily in danger?" Claire demanded, her voice stronger than she felt in her borrowed fancy dress. The agents exchanged glances. Miller stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave. These are classified security matters." "Don't brush me off," Claire said, thinking of Lily's terrified face in the ocean. "That little girl trusts me. She depends on me. I need to know if she's safe." Miller's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Dawson, with all due respect." "No," Claire cut him off. "I've spent every day with Lily for the past week. I know when she's scared. I've seen her flinch at sudden noises, how she checks behind curtains before entering a room. What aren't you telling her parents?" The room fell silent. Miller studied her for a long moment, then gestured for the other agents to leave. When they were alone, his professional mask softened slightly. "We're handling the situation," he said quietly. "That's not good enough," Claire replied. "I'm not asking as some outsider. I'm asking as someone who pulled that child from the ocean, who holds her when she cries at night." Miller ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking tired. "There's been a series of threats, letters, photographs, some disturbing messages. We're tracking the source, but whoever it is knows the White House protocols too well. They're always one step ahead." Claire's blood ran cold. "How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks. Before you arrived." Miller leaned against his desk. "The president knows, but he's been advised to maintain normal routines to avoid public panic." "And Lily? Does she know?" "She's picked up on more than we'd like," Miller admitted. "Kids are perceptive. She knows something's wrong, even if she doesn't understand what." Claire thought of all the times Lily had begged her to check under the bed, to leave the lights on, to stay just a little longer. It hadn't just been normal childhood fears. "I want to help," Claire said firmly. Miller shook his head. "This isn't a job for civilians, Mrs. Dawson. We have trained professionals." "Who don't know Lily like I do," Claire interrupted. "Your trained professionals didn't notice she's started carrying her stuffed rabbit everywhere again, or that she's barely eating unless someone she trusts is sitting with her." Miller's expression changed slightly, a flash of surprise crossing his face. "I'm not asking to join your security team," Claire continued. "I'm telling you that I'm already part of Lily's protection, whether you like it or not. That little girl chose me as her safe person. The least you can do is keep me informed so I can help keep her feeling secure." A long moment passed as Miller considered her words. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You'll report anything unusual directly to me. Any changes in her behavior, any strangers trying to contact her, anything that seems off. Understood?" "Yes," Claire agreed immediately. "And Mrs. Dawson?" Miller added. "This conversation never happened. The president wants to minimize knowledge of the situation." Claire nodded, her mind already racing with protective plans. She left the security office with her head high, her borrowed dress suddenly feeling less like a costume and more like armor. Later that night, Claire sat in Lily's pink bedroom, gently rocking the little girl in the oversized armchair. Lily's head rested against her shoulder. Her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly to her chest. "Claire?" Lily whispered, her voice small in the dim room. "Yes, sweetheart?" "The bad people. They won't find me, will they?" Claire's heart clenched. She pulled Lily closer, one hand stroking her hair. "I'll never let anyone hurt you," she promised fiercely. "Never." Thunder rattled the windows of the White House as Claire lay in her guest bed, listening to the rain pound against the centuries-old roof. She'd grown used to these elegant surroundings over the past few days, though the grandeur still felt surreal compared to her tiny apartment back home. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. Claire pulled the silk covers tighter, her mind drifting to Lily's bedtime routine just hours earlier. The little girl had been extra clingy tonight, begging for 3 bedtime stories instead of 1. The first warning came as a distant wail. Claire sat up, her heart suddenly racing. Was that a siren? The sound grew louder, joined by others until the entire building seemed to vibrate with their urgent cry. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Shouts echoed off marble walls. Claire threw off her covers and grabbed her robe, her hands shaking as she tied it around her waist. When she opened her door, the normally quiet corridor was in chaos. Secret Service agents ran past, their faces tight with tension. Their usual composed demeanor had cracked, revealing raw fear beneath. Claire caught fragments of their radio chatter. "Secure the perimeter. All exits. Find her." Her blood ran cold. "Find who?" "What's happening?" she called out to a passing agent, but he barely glanced her way. Agent Miller appeared around the corner, his tie loosened and face pale. When he saw Claire, he stopped short. "Miss Dawson, where's Lily?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Something in his expression confirmed her worst fears. "We're conducting a thorough search," he said, but his professional mask couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Please return to your room." "No." Claire pushed past him, her bare feet silent on the carpet as she ran toward Lily's bedroom. The door stood open, spilling light into the hallway. Inside, more agents photographed the scene while others spoke in hushed, urgent tones. The bed was empty, covers thrown back as if in haste. Lily's favorite stuffed elephant lay on the floor, abandoned. On the pillow, a single sheet of paper caught Claire's eye. "Ma'am, you can't be in here," an agent said, trying to block her view. But she'd already seen enough typed words on white paper, clinical and cruel. Demands for policy changes, threats of consequences if they weren't met. A ransom note. The President and First Lady burst into the room, Margaret's face streaked with tears while her husband's features had hardened into granite. Their eyes met Claire's, and in that moment all pretense of social barriers fell away. They were just parents, terrified for their child. "How?" Margaret's voice cracked. "How did they get past security?" Agent Miller cleared his throat. "We're reviewing camera footage. The storm caused a brief power fluctuation in the East Wing security system. It's possible." "Possible?" the President roared, making everyone flinch. "My daughter is gone. I don't want possibilities. I want answers." Claire's legs grew weak as reality crashed over her. She sank into a pink princess chair, Lily's favorite spot for their bedtime stories. Her mind replayed their last moments together, searching for signs she should have seen. Lily had been unusually afraid of the storm. She'd asked Claire to check under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains. "Promise you'll keep me safe?" she'd whispered. "I promise," Claire had said, kissing her forehead. Now the room spun with activity around her. Agents coordinated search patterns. Security footage was reviewed on tablets. The President made urgent phone calls while Margaret sobbed quietly into a handkerchief. But Claire could only hear Lily's voice from that first day at the beach. "Don't leave me." She'd promised to protect her. She'd sworn no one would hurt her. Yet, somehow, in the dark of night, evil had slipped through their defenses and stolen away this precious child who had trusted them all to keep her safe. The stuffed elephant caught her eye again. Lily never went anywhere without it. Even when they went down to dinner, she'd sneak it in her dress pocket. The fact that it lay discarded on the floor spoke volumes about the speed and force of her abduction. Thunder boomed overhead, and rain lashed against the windows with renewed fury. Somewhere out in that storm, Lily was alone and frightened. The thought made Claire's chest ache with a physical pain. Agent Miller approached, his face grim. "Miss Dawson, we need to ask you some questions. Standard procedure." Claire barely heard him. She was remembering Lily's smile at dinner just hours ago, the way she'd proudly shown off her new dress to everyone. How could everything have gone so wrong so quickly? The president's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp with authority, as he spoke into his phone. "I want every available agent on this. Every safe house checked. Every contact monitored. Whatever resources you need, you have them. Just find my daughter." Margaret sank into the chair beside Claire, her elegant composure shattered. Without thinking, Claire reached for her hand. The First Lady gripped it like a lifeline. "She trusts you so much," Margaret whispered. "These past few days, she's been happier than I've seen her in years." The words were like knives in Claire's heart. She thought of her own son, Ethan, sleeping safely down the hall. How many times had she worried about keeping him safe on their tight budget? But all their struggles seemed trivial now compared to this nightmare. An agent appeared in the doorway with new information. Signs of tampering had been found at a service entrance. The storm had provided perfect cover for the intruders. They had planned this well. Claire's mind kept circling back to Lily's fear earlier that evening. Had she sensed something? Had there been warning signs they'd all missed? The guilt was overwhelming. She should have stayed longer, checked one more time, done something, anything different. Claire slumped deeper into the small pink chair, her whole body trembling. Around her, the controlled chaos continued. Agents coordinating with local police, security teams reviewing protocols, the president demanding updates every few minutes. But she barely registered any of it. All she could see was Lily's face, trust shining in her eyes as Claire had promised to keep her safe. All she could hear was that little voice begging her not to leave. "She needed me," Claire whispered to herself, her voice breaking. "And I let her down." Thunder crashed outside, as if nature itself was echoing her anguish. The storm raged on, and somewhere in its darkness, a little girl who had trusted them all was now in the hands of those who would use her as a pawn in their political games. Thunder crashed outside as Secret Service agents rushed through the White House corridors, their urgent footsteps echoing off marble floors. Inside the presidential residence wing, Claire sat rigid in an ornate chair, her hands trembling as Agent Miller barked orders into his radio. All exits secured. No signs of forced entry. Camera feeds from the past hour under review. Claire pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to focus through the chaos. Something nagged at her memory, a conversation with Lily just yesterday during their afternoon tea. The little girl had been playing with her cookies, arranging them in a perfect circle on her plate. "I have a special place," Lily had whispered, leaning close to Claire. "Nobody knows about it, not even Daddy's guards." At the time, Claire had smiled, assuming it was just a child's imagination. But now, she stood up abruptly, catching Agent Miller's attention. "Wait, there might be something." The agent turned to her, his face tense. "Mrs. Dawson, please, we need to handle this." "No, listen." Claire stepped forward, her voice stronger than she felt. "Lily told me about a secret place. She mentioned it several times, actually. I thought she was just playing, but she was specific about certain details." President Grant strode into the room, his face ashen. "What secret place? My daughter doesn't keep secrets from her security detail." Claire met his eyes. "Sir, with all due respect, she's an 8-year-old girl who feels constantly watched. Of course she has secrets." The president's jaw tightened, but he gestured for her to continue. "Lily told me about roses that smell like candy." Claire closed her eyes, remembering. "She said they're near an old gate where nobody goes anymore. She likes to sit there and pretend she's in a fairy tale." Agent Miller stepped closer. "The old service entrance by the rose garden? That's been sealed for years." "Has anyone checked it?" Claire asked. The room fell silent except for the storm outside. Agent Miller grabbed his radio. "Team Delta, check the northwest service gate immediately. Possible breach point." Claire hugged herself, remembering more details. She said, "The gate makes funny noises, squeaks that sound like mice singing." She thought it was magical. Her voice cracked. She's just a little girl who wanted some privacy, some control over her world. Someone must have noticed her habits. The president sank into a chair, his face in his hands. All these guards, all these protocols, and my daughter found a way to slip away unnoticed. Children are resourceful, Claire said softly. Especially lonely ones. The radio crackled. "Sir, we found something at the northwest gate, recent traces in the mud, and—" The agent's voice hesitated. "There's a small pink hair ribbon caught on the hinge." Claire's heart stopped. "The ribbon I gave her yesterday. She was wearing it at bedtime." The president shot to his feet. "Get every available agent to that area now. Traffic cameras, security feeds from neighboring buildings. I want everything." Agent Miller was already moving. "We'll need to establish a perimeter, check all vehicles that pass through the area in the last—" "Wait." Claire stepped forward again. "There's more. Lily mentioned seeing delivery trucks. She said they reminded her of ice cream vans, but they were white with blue writing." "Local businesses?" Agent Miller asked. "No." Claire shook her head. "She specifically said they weren't from around here. She noticed because they didn't have the same symbols as the regular delivery trucks she sees." The president snapped his fingers at a nearby aide. "Get me a list of all registered delivery services in the D.C. area. Cross-reference with any unknown vehicles reported in the vicinity this week." Claire wrapped her arms tighter around herself, fighting back tears. "She trusted me with her secrets. I should have realized, should have told someone." "Mrs. Dawson." The president's voice was surprisingly gentle. "You may have just given us our best lead. Miller, coordinate with local PD. I want those traffic cameras checked for any non-standard delivery vehicles, particularly ones without proper district registration." Agent Miller nodded sharply and strode from the room, speaking rapid-fire into his radio. Outside, more vehicles could be heard arriving, their tires squealing on wet pavement. Claire moved to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass. The rain was coming down in sheets now, obscuring the carefully manicured grounds. Somewhere out there Lily was scared and alone, probably wondering why no one had come for her yet. "She gets sad when it storms," Claire whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "She counts seconds between lightning and thunder to feel brave." The president came to stand beside her. "You know my daughter better than I do," he said quietly. "And I'm her father." Claire turned to face him. "It's not too late to change that, sir. But first, we have to find her." "We will." His voice hardened with determination. "Every federal agency will be mobilized within the hour. No one takes my daughter and gets away with it." But Claire barely heard him. Her mind was racing, piecing together other small details Lily had shared. The delivery trucks always came early, Lily had said, before the tourist buses. They parked in the same spot where she could see them from her secret place. "Sir," she said suddenly, "we need to check security footage from early mornings, not just tonight. If they were watching her, learning her patterns." The president was already moving. "Miller!" he shouted into the hallway. "Get me archives of all security footage from the northwest sector, pre-dawn hours, last 2 weeks." Claire sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. She'd promised Lily she'd never let anyone hurt her. Now, watching the organized chaos of the search unfold around her, she made another silent promise. "If they don't find her," she whispered to herself, her hands clenching into fists, "I will." Claire paced in the White House Situation Room, watching screens flash with surveillance footage and maps. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, a reminder that she didn't belong in this world of power and protocol. But that didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except finding Lily. "Ma'am, please wait here while we coordinate the search teams," Agent Miller said, his voice clipped and professional. Claire squared her shoulders. "No, I'm coming with you. This is a federal operation." "I know her," Claire interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know how she thinks, where she might go, and I made her a promise." Agent Miller started to object, but another agent whispered something in his ear. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Fine. But you follow our lead, understood? Claire nodded, relief flooding through her. She quickly called the White House nanny watching Ethan, telling him she'd be back soon. The lie felt bitter on her tongue. She had no idea when she'd return. Within minutes, they were speeding through Washington's dark streets in a convoy of black SUVs. Rain pelted the windows as lightning illuminated the city in harsh flashes. Claire pressed her forehead against the cool glass, remembering how Lily had once described her special exploring places during their afternoon walks. The docks, Claire said suddenly. She talked about watching boats with her grandfather before he died, said it was their secret. Agent Miller spoke into his radio, redirecting teams to the waterfront district. The SUVs swerved east, tires splashing through puddles. Claire's hands clenched in her lap, her mind spinning with terrible possibilities. Was Lily cold? Scared? Hurt? They reached the industrial waterfront, where abandoned warehouses loomed like ancient sentinels. The agents moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into teams with weapons drawn. Claire stayed close to Agent Miller, her eyes scanning the shadows. "This is where the old fishing companies used to be," she whispered. "Lily said her grandfather worked here." Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing rusted equipment and broken windows. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but thunder still rolled overhead. Claire's shoes squelched in the mud as they moved between buildings. A flash of color caught her eye, something pink fluttering against a chain-link fence. Her heart leaped as she rushed forward. "Wait!" Agent Miller hissed, but Claire was already there, carefully untangling a familiar ribbon from the metal links. "This is hers," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She was wearing it today. I braided her hair myself this morning." The silk ribbon trembled in her wet fingers, a fragile connection to the missing child. Agent Miller spoke rapidly into his radio, while other agents converged on their position. They found footprints in the mud, leading toward a massive warehouse with boarded windows. Claire recognized the faded company name, the same one Lily had mentioned in her stories about her grandfather. The agents moved into formation, their training evident in every precise movement. Claire hung back as they prepared for a breach, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The rain beaded on her jacket as she clutched Lily's ribbon like a lifeline. She thought of Lily's bright smile that morning, of her small arms wrapped tight around Claire's neck. She remembered her promise. "I'll never let anyone hurt you." The weight of that broken promise crushed her chest. Agent Miller signaled to his team, their weapons ready. Claire closed her eyes, the ribbon pressed to her lips. "Please, Lord," she whispered into the dark. "Let her be alive." The night air crackled with tension as armored vehicles surrounded the abandoned warehouse. Claire huddled behind a police car, her heart hammering against her ribs. Secret Service agents in tactical gear moved like shadows, their weapons ready. "Stay here," Agent Thompson ordered, his voice firm but kind. "We'll handle this." Claire nodded, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. The warehouse loomed before them, its broken windows like dark eyes staring down at them. Somewhere inside was Lily, scared, alone, waiting for someone to save her. The raid began with a thunderous crash as agents breached multiple entrances. Shouts echoed through the night, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Claire flinched at each shot, pressing herself closer to the car's cold metal. Her motherly instincts screamed at her to run in, to find Lily, but she forced herself to stay put. "Clear!" voices called out from different parts of the building. "Moving to second floor!" More gunfire, more shouting. Claire's fingers dug into her palms, leaving half-moon marks. She thought of Ethan, safe back at the White House with the First Lady, and said a silent prayer for Lily. Then she heard it, a high-pitched scream that cut through all other noise. "Help, please!" Lily's voice. Claire would know it anywhere. "Third floor, east wing!" someone shouted. "We've got movement!" Without thinking, Claire pushed away from the car. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could catch up. She slipped through the warehouse's side entrance, past startled agents who were too focused on securing the area to stop her. "Ma'am, you can't—" An agent called after her, but Claire was already racing up the metal stairs, her footsteps clanging against the grating. The warehouse interior was a maze of shadows and echoes. Emergency lights cast eerie blue glows across empty storage spaces. Claire's breath came in short gasps as she climbed, following the sound of commotion above. Another scream, closer now. "Let me go!" Claire reached the third floor, her legs burning. Agents were clustered at the far end of the corridor, trying to breach a heavy metal door. She could hear Lily crying on the other side. "Stand back," an agent was saying. "We're going to breach." But Claire had already spotted something they hadn't, a small maintenance access panel near the floor, probably used for utilities, just big enough for someone her size. While the agents focused on the door, Claire dropped to her knees and crawled toward the panel. Her hands trembled as she pulled it open. The metal edge sliced her palm, but she barely noticed the pain. "What are you doing?" someone yelled. "Stop her!" Claire ignored them, squeezing through the narrow opening. She emerged into a small room filled with old office furniture and the smell of dust. Lily was there, tied to a chair, while a man in black argued frantically into a phone. "It's over," he was saying. "They're here. What do you want me to—" He spun around as Claire burst in, his eyes widening in surprise. For a fraction of a second, they stared at each other. Then Lily screamed again, this time with hope. "Claire!" The man lunged for Lily. But Claire was faster. Years of waitressing had given her quick reflexes. She grabbed a broken chair and swung it with all her strength. The man stumbled backward, tripping over cables. The door exploded inward. Agents poured through the opening, weapons raised. "On the ground. Now!" Claire didn't wait to see what happened next. She rushed to Lily, her fingers working quickly to untie the ropes. The girl was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, sweetheart," Claire whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." The moment the last rope fell away, Lily launched herself into Claire's arms. She buried her face in Claire's neck, sobbing uncontrollably. "I knew you'd come," she choked out between tears. "I knew you'd find me." Claire held her tight, rocking gently back and forth as chaos swirled around them. Agents secured the kidnapper, radioed all clear signals, and began documenting the scene. But Claire focused only on the trembling child in her arms, on the miracle that she was alive and safe. "I promised I wouldn't let anyone hurt you," Claire murmured into Lily's hair. "I'll always come for you. Always." Lily's arms tightened around Claire's neck. She was still crying, but the desperate edge was gone from her tears. They were tears of relief now, of release. Agent Thompson appeared beside them, his face a mix of exasperation and respect. "That was incredibly dangerous, Miss Dawson," he said. But there was no real anger in his voice. "You could have been killed." Claire just nodded, still holding Lily. She knew he was right, knew she had broken every protocol and safety measure. But she also knew she would do it again, in a heartbeat. Some instincts ran deeper than reason or rules. "The medical team is waiting outside," Thompson continued more gently. "We need to get her checked out." "Come on, sweetie," Claire said, starting to stand. But Lily clung tighter. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Please, don't leave me." "I won't," Claire promised. "I'll stay right with you the whole time." She gathered Lily in her arms, the girl's legs wrapping around her waist like a koala. Together, they made their way out of the warehouse, past the chaos of the raid's aftermath. Claire's muscles ached from the climb and the adrenaline, but she barely noticed. All that mattered was the precious weight in her arms, the soft breath against her neck, the knowledge that Lily was safe. Outside, red and blue lights painted the night in urgent colors. A medical team rushed forward with a stretcher, but Lily whimpered and held on tighter. "It's okay," Claire soothed. "I've got her. We can do the checkup like this." The paramedics exchanged glances but adapted, working around Claire as she sat on the back of an ambulance, still cradling Lily. They checked vital signs, cleaned small scratches, draped a shock blanket around both of them. "I knew you'd come," Lily whispered again, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "You're my safe person." Flashing lights painted the warehouse district in alternating red and blue. The night air, which moments ago had crackled with gunfire, now hummed with the urgent voices of agents and first responders. Claire held Lily close, the girl's arms locked around her neck as they emerged from the building's shadows into the chaos outside. "You came for me," Lily whispered against Claire's shoulder, her voice hoarse from crying. "You really came?" "Of course I did, sweetheart." Claire stroked Lily's tangled hair, her own tears falling freely now. "I promised I'd never let anyone hurt you." Secret Service agents formed a protective circle around them as they walked toward the waiting vehicles. Lily's grip tightened when she heard familiar voices calling her name. Lily. Oh God, Lily. Through the sea of dark suits, the President and First Lady ran forward, their faces etched with worry and relief. Margaret reached them first, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled, her eyes red from crying. "My baby," she sobbed, touching Lily's back. "My precious baby." But Lily wouldn't let go of Claire. She turned her head to look at her parents, but kept her arms firmly around her rescuer's neck. The President stopped short, his usual commanding presence softened by the sight of his daughter, clinging to this woman who had, once again, brought her back safely. "It's okay, honey," Claire murmured, gently rubbing Lily's back. "Your mom and dad are here now. You're safe." Slowly, carefully, Claire helped transfer Lily into her mother's waiting arms. Margaret clutched her daughter close, whispering prayers of thanks as the President wrapped his arms around them both. The family stood together, a tight circle of relief and love, while camera flashes erupted around them like lightning. Claire stepped back, suddenly aware of the media presence. Reporters called questions from behind police barriers, their cameras capturing every moment. She tried to fade into the background, but President Grant turned to her, his eyes shining with tears. "Claire," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. Everyone fell silent. "You saved my daughter." Again. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her forward to stand with his family. "You reminded us what real courage looks like." More camera flashes. Claire felt her face flush, uncomfortable with the attention but unable to step away from the President's firm grip on her hand. "Sir, she started, but he cut her off. "No, please, let me finish." His voice grew stronger, taking on the commanding tone that had won him elections. "This woman, this incredible mother, didn't just save Lily from drowning. She didn't just help us find her tonight. She showed us something more important. She showed us that love doesn't care about status or wealth. It doesn't check bank accounts or social standing. Real love, real courage, comes from the heart." Reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks. Video cameras whirred. Claire stood frozen, overwhelmed by his words and the gravity of the moment. "Dad?" Lily's small voice broke through the tension. She reached out from her mother's arms toward Claire. "Can Claire stay with us? Please?" The President looked at his daughter, then at Claire, something shifting in his expression. "Would you consider it?" he asked quietly. "We could use someone like you, not just for Lily, but to help other children who need a voice." Before Claire could respond, a small figure darted through the crowd of agents. "Mom!" Ethan called out, running toward her. The Secret Service moved to stop him, but the President waved them back. Ethan crashed into Claire's legs, hugging her tight. "You found her!" he exclaimed, then turned to Lily. "See? I told you my mom would find you. She always makes things better." Lily wiggled free from her mother's arms and reached for Ethan. The two children hugged each other fiercely, their friendship strengthened by the ordeal. Claire watched them, her heart swelling with love and something else, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was belonging. Margaret stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Claire's arm. "Please say yes," she whispered. "Not because we're asking, but because this is where you're meant to be." Claire looked around at the scene before her. Ethan and Lily holding hands, the President standing tall but humbled, his wife's kind eyes, and the chaos of media and law enforcement swirling around them like a storm they'd weathered together. For the first time since she'd become a single mother, she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. Ethan beamed up at her, his face glowing with pride. Lily reached for her hand, small fingers intertwining with hers. In that moment, surrounded by flashing cameras and the weight of history, Claire felt the last of her walls crumble. The warehouse loomed behind them, a dark reminder of what they'd overcome. But here, in this circle of light and love, watching Ethan hug Lily tightly, Claire knew they'd found something precious, a place where they truly belonged. The morning headlines blazed across Claire's tablet screen as she sat in her White House guest room. Unfit hero. Questions arise about single mother's role. Another screamed, "From diner to D.C., is America's hero mom out of her league?" Claire's hands trembled as she scrolled through the articles. They dug deep: her late rent payments, her multiple jobs, the times she'd relied on food banks to feed Ethan. One particularly cruel columnist suggested she'd orchestrated the whole rescue to gain access to power. "Mom?" Ethan's sleepy voice called from the adjoining room. "Are you okay?" Claire quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine, honey. Just reading." But she wasn't fine. The weight of judgment pressed down on her shoulders. These people didn't know her struggles, didn't understand the choices she'd made to keep her son fed and sheltered. They saw only her shabby clothes and unpaid bills, not her determination or love. A gentle knock at the door startled her. "Come in," Claire called, hastily setting the tablet aside. First Lady Margaret Grant entered, elegant as always in a pale blue suit. But today, her usual formal demeanor had softened. "Good morning, Claire. I thought we might talk." Claire stood awkwardly, smoothing her borrowed blouse. "Of course, Mrs. Grant. Please, sit." Margaret settled into an armchair, gesturing for Claire to do the same. "I've seen the headlines." Heat rushed to Claire's cheeks. "I'm sorry if I've caused any embarrassment." "Stop." Margaret's voice was firm but kind. "You haven't embarrassed anyone. In fact—" She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I owe you an apology." Claire blinked in surprise. "You don't owe me anything." "I do." Margaret leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped in her lap. "When you first saved Lily at the beach, I was grateful but distant. I saw you through the same lens these critics are using, as someone from a different world, someone who couldn't possibly understand our life." Claire's throat tightened. She stared down at her own hands, roughened from years of waitressing and cleaning. "But I was wrong," Margaret continued. "Do you know what Lily said to me last night, after you brought her home?" Claire shook her head. She said, "Claire makes me feel safe like you do, Mommy, but she's not afraid to show when she's sad or scared, too." Margaret's voice wavered slightly. "My daughter lives in a world of perfect facades, Claire. Everyone around her pretends everything is fine, even when it isn't. But you're real. You gave my daughter something no bodyguard or title could love." Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. "I just did what any mother would do." "No." Margaret reached over and took Claire's hand. "You did what a true mother would do. You saw past titles and politics to a child who needed help. You risked everything twice to save her. And you showed her that strength doesn't come from power or money, but from here." She placed her hand over her heart. "But the papers don't matter." Margaret's tone grew fierce. "Let them talk. They don't know what I know now, that sometimes the most valuable people in our lives come from unexpected places." Claire thought of Lily's trust, of Ethan's pride in her, of the way both children had bonded despite their different worlds. "I never wanted attention or status," she said quietly. "I just couldn't walk away when someone needed help. That's exactly why you deserve both." Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. "We're holding a press conference this afternoon. My husband wants to announce your appointment as our new Children's Advocacy Director." Claire's mouth fell open. "But I don't have the qualifications." "You have the only qualifications that matter," Margaret interrupted. "Compassion, courage, and the wisdom that comes from real-life experience." She smiled warmly. "Besides, Lily refuses to work with any other tutor now. She says you make learning fun." As Margaret left, Claire sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. Through the window, she could see the grand Washington Monument piercing the morning sky. Just weeks ago, she'd been worrying about making rent. Now she was being offered a chance to make a real difference. Her tablet pinged with another news alert, but this time, Claire didn't reach for it. She didn't need to read more criticism. Her worth wasn't measured in headlines or bank accounts. It was measured in the trust of a child, in the strength to keep going when things got hard, and in the courage to love without hesitation. She heard laughter from the garden below, Ethan and Lily, playing tag among the rose bushes. two children from vastly different worlds, finding joy in simple friendship. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson in all of this. That compassion bridged all divides, and love knew no social boundaries. The autumn breeze rustled through the rose garden as Claire sat on a marble bench watching Ethan and Lily chase fallen leaves. Their laughter echoed against the White House walls, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar over the past weeks. "They're quite inseparable now, aren't they?" Margaret Grant's voice came from behind her. The First Lady settled onto the bench beside Claire, her usual formal demeanor softened by a gentle smile. Claire nodded, her heart warming at the sight of the children. They bring out the best in each other. Margaret smoothed her skirt, a gesture Claire had come to recognize as a sign she was about to say something important. "Claire, James and I have been talking about you, about Lily, about everything that's happened." Claire's stomach tightened. Despite all the kindness she'd been shown, part of her still expected to be told it was time to leave, to return to their old life. "We'd like to offer you a position," Margaret continued. "Two positions, actually. First, as Lily's official caretaker, she trusts you in a way she's never trusted anyone else. And second," she paused, making sure she had Claire's full attention, "as our administration's special advocate for children's welfare programs." Claire blinked, certain she'd misheard. I don't understand." "You have something remarkable, Claire. Not just your courage, but your insight. You understand what children need, because you've fought so hard to provide it for Ethan. We need that perspective in our programs." "But I don't have any qualifications," Claire protested. "No degree, no experience in politics." Margaret's laugh was warm. "You have the most important qualification, you know, what it's like to be on the other side of these programs, to need them, to fall through the cracks sometimes. And you have something else, a heart that sees children for who they are, not what their circumstances make them seem to be." Claire watched Lily showing Ethan how to make a pile of leaves, her golden hair catching the sunlight. The little girl looked up and waved, her smile bright and genuine, so different from the frightened child she'd pulled from the ocean months ago. "The salary would be substantial," Margaret continued. "Enough to give you and Ethan security, your own place nearby. We're not offering charity, Claire. We're offering recognition of your value." Tears pricked at Claire's eyes. Value. How long had it been since anyone had seen that in her? Since she'd seen it in herself? I need time to think," she managed. "Of course." Margaret stood, squeezing Claire's shoulder. "Take all the time you need." That evening, Claire sat cross-legged on her guest room bed, trying to sort through her thoughts. Ethan was sprawled on the floor, working on homework with focused determination. "Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk for a minute?" He looked up, his pencil pausing mid-equation. "Sure, Mom. Mrs. Grant offered me a job today. 2 jobs, actually. We could stay here in Washington, have our own place. You'd have to change schools." "Would we still see Lily?" he asked immediately. "Yes, every day. I'd be taking care of her, and also helping other kids who need help." Ethan's face lit up. "Like how you always helped Mrs. Rodriguez's kids at the apartment when she had to work late." Claire smiled, remembering the elderly neighbor whose grandchildren she'd often watched. "Something like that, but bigger, helping lots of kids." "But you're worried," Ethan said, showing that perceptiveness that sometimes took her breath away. "I am," she admitted. "It's a big change, and I've always tried to make it on my own, to show you that we don't need handouts." "Mom," Ethan climbed onto the bed beside her. "Remember what you told me when I was scared to try out for the soccer team? That sometimes being brave means letting good things happen?" Claire's throat tightened. "When did you get so wise?" "From you." He leaned against her shoulder. "And maybe this is God's way of giving us a new start. Like how you always say He has a plan, even when we can't see it." She pulled him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo and the lingering trace of autumn leaves in his hair. Her son, who'd never complained about tight budgets or second-hand clothes, who'd somehow grown into this thoughtful, generous boy despite all their struggles. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. "Come in," Claire called. Lily poked her head in, already in her pajamas. "Can I say good night?" "Of course, sweetheart." The little girl padded across the room and climbed onto the bed, fitting herself naturally into their embrace. "Did Mom tell you?" she asked Claire. "About you staying?" Claire's heart caught at Lily's casual use of Mom for Margaret. It was a reminder that this wasn't just about jobs or security. It was about healing, about family in all its forms. "She did," Claire answered. "I'm still thinking about it." "Please say yes," Lily whispered. "I sleep better when you're here, and Ethan's like the brother I always wanted." Claire looked at these two children, one born to privilege but starved for genuine love, one born to struggle but rich in spirit. Both of them looking at her with such hope, such trust. She thought of all the other children out there, hungry, scared, alone. Children she might help, armed with both her hard-won wisdom and real resources. Taking a deep breath, Claire reached for her phone. "Mrs. Grant, if you're still up, I'd like to accept your offer." Her voice broke as tears of gratitude streamed down her cheeks. Ethan and Lily hugged her tighter, their own eyes shining. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, to both positions. Thank you for seeing something in me worth believing in." As she ended the call, Claire held these two precious children close, marveling at how God's plan had unfolded. From a desperate rescue on a summer beach to this moment of profound grace, He had led them here, to this new beginning. The crisp autumn morning painted the White House gardens in shades of gold and crimson. Claire walked along the winding path, holding Ethan's hand on her right and Lily's on her left. Their footsteps crunched softly on the fallen leaves that carpeted the ground. "Look, Mom," Ethan pointed excitedly at a cluster of late-blooming roses. "They're still growing, even though it's getting cold, just like us," Lily added with the wisdom that sometimes surprised Claire. "We keep growing stronger too." Claire squeezed both their hands, her heart full. The morning sun caught the children's faces, highlighting their matching grins. 6 months ago, she would never have imagined this scene. Her son racing through the most famous garden in America, playing hide-and-seek behind centuries-old trees with the president's daughter. A group of reporters stood at their usual post by the garden gate, but their cameras no longer felt invasive. The headlines had changed. Gone were the cruel speculations about her poverty, the whispers about her worthiness. Now they called her America's Mother of Courage, a title that still made her blush. "Can we feed the ducks?" Lily tugged at Claire's sleeve, pointing toward the small pond where a family of mallards paddled lazily. "Of course, sweetheart." Claire reached into her pocket for the bag of proper duck feed the groundskeeper had given them. No more torn pieces of sandwich bread. They did things properly now. As the children scattered feed across the water's surface, Claire noticed how Lily no longer flinched at sudden movements. The shadows under her eyes had disappeared, replaced by the healthy glow of a child who felt secure and loved. Ethan, too, had changed. Gone was the worry that used to crease his young forehead when he thought about their next meal or rent payment. Secret Service agents still maintained their vigilant watch, but they'd become familiar faces. Agent Thompson, who had once regarded Claire with suspicion, now gave her a friendly nod as she passed. "Miss Dawson," he called out, "the First Lady asked me to remind you about the Children's Advocacy meeting at 2. "Thank you," Claire replied, still amazed at how naturally such conversations came now. Her new role as children's welfare advocate had given her a platform to help other struggling families. Just last week, she'd spoken before Congress about expanding support for single parents. The sound of running feet drew her attention back to the children. Ethan had discovered a particularly crunchy pile of leaves and was showing Lily how to jump in them properly. Their laughter rang out, pure and uninhibited. "Careful with your dress, Lily," Claire called out automatically, then caught herself smiling. She'd learned to balance the formal requirements of White House life with allowing children to simply be children. A cool breeze rustled through the garden, carrying the scent of autumn spices from the White House kitchen. The chef was probably preparing lunch, simple, healthy meals that Claire had requested to replace the overly fancy fare. She'd kept her down-to-earth sensibilities, even as she adapted to this new world. Margaret had been right about that. "We need your perspective," the First Lady had told her. "Your strength comes from knowing both worlds." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lawn. Claire watched as Ethan showed Lily how to make leaf angels, just as she had taught him in their old neighborhood park. The sight of them together, the son of a former waitress and the daughter of the president, filled her with quiet joy. A photographer captured the moment, but Claire barely noticed anymore. She knew tomorrow's papers would show this scene. Two children playing, free from the barriers of class and status that once seemed so insurmountable. "Mom," Ethan called out, "tell Lily about the time we made leaf crowns at our old park." Claire joined them on the ground, helping them weave red and gold leaves into circles. As she placed a crown on Lily's head, the girl beamed with the pure happiness that had once been so rare on her face. "Now we're both queens," Lily declared, placing a slightly crushed crown on Claire's head. "And I'm the knight," Ethan announced, brandishing a small branch like a sword. Claire laughed, adjusting her leaf crown. From the corner of her eye, she saw Margaret watching from her office window, smiling at the scene below. The First Lady gave a small wave, which Claire returned. Their relationship had evolved into something neither woman had expected. A friendship built on shared concern for their children and a desire to make the world better for all families. The morning stretched on, golden and peaceful. Claire watched as Ethan and Lily ran around the garden, their faces flushed with excitement and exercise. They were safe here, happy here. The thought still amazed her. A year ago, she had been counting quarters for the laundromat, working double shifts, and praying her car would start each morning. Now she sat in a historic garden, wearing clothes she hadn't bought at a thrift store, watching her son thrive alongside a child she'd grown to love as her own. But it wasn't the material changes that mattered most. It was the purpose she'd found, the dignity she'd reclaimed, and the knowledge that love, pure, simple love, could transform lives at every level of society. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by gratitude. The crisp autumn air filled her lungs as she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. She might not have a mansion of her own or a fleet of cars, but she possessed something far more valuable: purpose, dignity, and the profound understanding that love could change even the most powerful hearts. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Claire Dawson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.